So one thing that I have found that I do with my sales and marketing organization is I tie them the same revenue goal. I don't assign marketing a leads goal, and I don't assign sales and execution on leads goals.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Revenue Insights. I'm delighted that today I am joined by Brady Holcomb. Brady is the CRO at a company called Matium. Brady, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you so much for having me. I've been an avid watcher of your channel for a while now, and I really find it high value, so thank you.
Very good. So normally we like to start by understanding a bit about your history and how you got into the role that you're in. So maybe you could kind of give us a quick whistle-stop tour through your career.
Yeah, well, Guy, I think I'll start probably a little bit differently than most of the people that you interview. And I'll start back when I was 5 years old. I had this incredible father. Unfortunately, he's no longer around. But I had this incredible father, and he would involve me in his work, right? And so there were a couple times a year where he'd take me on sales trips. And I remember one when I was 5 years old, and we went to South Florida. We ended up hitting the beach at the end of the day, but by one of the last calls, he had me believing that I was selling the product. Now, I can only imagine the looks that they must have been giving one another, and they must have been great friends. But in my perspective, I was selling. So at the age of 5, doing professional sales. But, he sold commercial flooring. And I don't know if you remember those samples they had, but they're about as big as a doormat, right? And when he would get those discontinued, he would pile them up in the garage. And at the age of 5, I'd put them in my little red wagon, and I would take them door to door in Jacksonville, Florida, and I would sell them for 25 cents a piece. So my sales career started early. I've always loved it. It's always been fun. And then I didn't realize that there was some differentiation between me and others until I got into more of a professional setting, such as Bell South, and then ended up being fortunate enough to finish, be a top 1% performer, do the President's Club trip multiple times. And then they made the horrible mistake of putting me into leadership, right? So just because you can perform as an individual contributor certainly doesn't mean those traits translate well over into being a sales leader. So that was a very interesting learning experience. Then I was extremely lucky. One of the past VPs at Bell South went to work and become the SVP of sales at PGI, and recruited me to come and run a division. It was the first time I'd be a director. And I went over there to get, a taste of SaaS, right? And walked into an existing team of 6 people. And this was a great learning opportunity. But the thing that was really great there is I stumbled across a book called Sales 2.0, who was co-authored by a wonderful woman named Annika Seeley. And this book was about driving proficiency as well as efficiency within the sales model, using technology and really focusing on the alignment between sales and marketing. So that was a great introduction. I became an early adapter of, marketing automation. And I still feel like the company that I brought on as our vendor owes me a lot of money because they learned a lot off the mistakes they made when we were trying to implement their solution. But in theory, it worked well. So that company actually ended up hiring me. That was Silverpop. I went there to be their director of enterprise sales. I started their SMB channel as well while I was there. Grew that to over 20 people. Things were going well. And then I got my first VP offer from Cevion to go in and launch a brand new solution that they had there. And then Cevion got acquired, got very fortunate from a timing perspective. And when I was at Cevion, Guy, this is sort of funny, to Silverpop's dismay, I did not acquire the Silverpop solution, unfortunately, for Cevion. I acquired Marketo's solution because when I was at Cevion, we were always getting destroyed by Marketo. And anyways, I didn't exactly understand why, but I came to find out real quick that Marketo just continued to lower the price until they won the business. So that was their initial go-to-market strategy, which was very effective, of course. But I acquired their solution while I was at Cevion. And then when I took the package at Cevion, Marketo, they offered me a job to run their East Coast hub, right, as their GM and VP of East Coast sales. So launched the office, and that was a great run. Anyways, and it's just it's continued to evolve from there. So that was a great opportunity, though, to continue to be involved in that marketing automation.
If there's a theme there, you seem to move on to the supplier that you enjoyed the most. So that's interesting. So obviously we all know the brand Marketo. Talk us through that. So you joined Marketo in what role? Because it was quite early, I understand.
Yeah, GM and VP of sales. It was before Adobe acquired them.
Yeah, I was going to say, were you there for the acquisition, or had you moved on by then?
No, I was there at the acquisition, and then they wanted to move everyone in Atlanta to the Denver hub. And anyways, we had my kids here in the school district, since their conception, basically. So we weren't leaving.
That makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned there this idea of aligning sales and marketing. And now I know that's still a challenge for most businesses. Everyone seems to, a lot of the businesses we talk to, one of the big challenges is that marketing's definition of what an ICP is and sales definition tends to be two very different things. So how do you go about, where have you seen success in aligning those and what have you seen the outcomes of that?
Yeah, so actually I was just involved in the hiring of a CMO here recently for Matium. And what I do is I look at the traits that are needed in a CMO, and I set up a multiple stage interview process. And within each stage, I look for these skill sets. And then we have them do a final presentation, give them the company information, see what they do in their final presentation, and then make sure that we're all, as aligned as possible from a sales and marketing perspective, as well as other leadership within the company, with them coming in to really set the tone from an expectation perspective. So I think doing a lot of groundwork and setting a solid foundation from the very beginning in the interview process is a fundamental key to making sure you have alignment in such instances as the ICP creation.
So we just hired our own new marketing director, and for the first time we used a scorecard, and it was transformational for us. And some of the people I really liked or got on with on the interview weren't necessarily the right people for us. And when we looked at it from a scorecard perspective, it became clear who the right candidate was. So no, I completely understand that recruitment process is absolutely key. But then talk us through this idea of alignment with sales and marketing once they're in and onboarded. How do you kind of keep them all moving towards the same goal and working collaboratively?
Yeah, so whenever I hire a CMO, I make certain that we meet 2 times a week, right? And so what I do is I always work my number backwards, and I involve my whole team in creating our GTM, right? So here's our end target, and then what do we need to start doing to break that down all the way from, so we start with the end goal. We go to the ACV that lets us know how many sales we need to make, take our average closing ratio that lets us know how many proposals we need to make. And we just keep drilling down through the funnel until we get to the top of the funnel. And then we're know how many people we need to identify from an ICP perspective. And so I want to make sure during that GTM creation, right, I want to make sure that marketing's involved in that in every step. And it's a very collaborative process. So we have an agreement and alignment from the very beginning. And then I have I meet with marketing twice a week. One of those meetings is just with me and the CMO. And then also one of those meetings is with a couple of the members from the marketing team, as well as the CMO, with the entire sales organization, because it's important to me that not only does marketing deliver information about campaigns coming up, but it's also extremely important to give sales the opportunity to give feedback from what they're hearing regarding not only current campaigns, but ideas that they have for future campaigns. And then, of course, we collect that data via our CRM as well.
Yeah, I mean, we see in a lot of organizations marketing saying, well, I've hit my goal. I've delivered the leads I said I would. And of course, sales sitting back going, well, hold on, these leads don't qualify, or they're not ICP, or I need more leads, right? And a lot of the time, marketing ends up becoming the kicking. They get kicked a lot by sales because they feel that they're the scapegoat a lot of the time. And if anything, there's also, I think sales have got a big responsibility to actually manage those leads correctly and actually keeping visibility of kind of how much coverage each individual rep needs to hit quota. One of the things we found in the B2B benchmark report we did this year, the deals that are being worked by the sales team are then they're allowing those deals to rush through, and maybe up before they've actually qualified them correctly. They're not necessarily, they're allowing them to step through the stages far too quickly, and then deals are closing lost at the end when it turns out that maybe they weren't even a deal in the first place. And so they're constantly going, I need more leads. But actually, it turns out that the top performers are quite happy working a much smaller number of opportunities because they are qualifying them correctly and they have a much better conversion rate. So the level of coverage the top performers tend to need to hit quota is much, much lower than the rest of the sales team, who are just trying to get through a volume and think it's just about, if I have enough sales calls, eventually I'll close some. So I think the sales team have got a real, need to be held to account to make sure that they're doing the right things at every stage of the sales cycle. And it's just as important as it is to generate the leads in the first place.
You talked a moment ago about the tension between sales and marketing, and nothing could be more real. It's a very real thing. And actually, in one of the stages in the interview process, we cover this. I would ask the CMO candidates, how do you resolve this issue? And this one candidate said, well, I do this at such a great job that I never have a tension with sales. And I'm like, well, we know that candidate's not going further in the hiring process, because that can't be true. I've been in this game for a while. I've never seen a kumbaya moment for a long period of time between sales and marketing. So one thing that I have found that I do with my sales and marketing organization is I tie them the same revenue goal, right? And so I don't assign marketing a leads goal, and I don't assign sales an execution on leads goals. What I do is I let them share a revenue target based upon closed deals, and that seems to unite them, since they're stretching towards the same goal. Not only does it unite them, but it helps them move forward in the same way. And it to me, it creates more synergy amongst the two, especially within leadership, where they're helping one another versus arguing.
I think that's a really valid point. One of the big changes we made here is making it clear to the leaders of the departments that their first team is each other. The SLT is their primary team. And their individual siloed teams that work for them, they're important. But ultimately, the team that they need to think about first is that cross department leadership team, and they are all working towards a common goal. So now that's easy to link the sales guys to a number because they're getting commission on it. So what have you done around compensation for marketing? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's definitely a variable to their overall compensation, or their OTE, and it's tied directly to revenue obtainment.
That's interesting. So they really are aligned. So when the sales guys ring the bell, the marketing people are earning an income from that as well. So I think that's a really interesting approach. I've not seen that very often. Normally they're tied to some sort of MQL, and again that's where the disalignment comes. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, it takes away a lot. I mean, you still have some tension within, hey, is this an MQL? Is this an SQL? What's the BANT we're using? What's the scoring model, the thresholds, et cetera? You still have those discussions. But if they are tied to the same target, it seems like they're more aligned, and they're more focused, and more energy is going towards the revenue target versus, are we getting enough MQLs or SQLs in play?
Now, one of the interesting data points we picked up in our last report was that we saw the volume of leads coming into businesses actually increase this year by nearly 25%. But the volume of leads that represented ICP really hadn't changed. And so we're now in a situation where the salespeople have got even more to be distracted by. How have you dealt with this kind of influx of even more leads for them to work on, knowing that the ICP volume really hasn't changed a lot? So what kind of disciplines are you seeing putting in place to get them working the right deals, not just every deal coming in the door?
Yeah, so we use the MQL to SQL model, and it doesn't qualify within SQL unless it hits a certain threshold scoring, right? And so the ICP is part of that threshold scoring model. And so if they're not adding up, maybe their digital behavior is indicating they have a high propensity to buy. But if their ICP is not appropriately aligned, then they usually don't hit the threshold to go to SQL. So the sales are executing on them.
That makes a lot of sense. And are you using a specific qualification methodology? Are you a fan of a BANT or a MEDDIC, or is there a particular methodology that you encourage the team to use when they're qualifying?
I do. So I can't tell you how many sales trainings I've been to over the year, how many books I've read, right? I mean, there's been more than I can remember. I've gone through MEDDIC, definitely. The list goes on. But the one that I subscribe to the most is Axiom Sales Kinetics. It used to be called Axiom Salesforce Development. But hands down, there's not a close second to Axiom. It's incredible. And they have, basically a very simplified 4-step process Their second step is the qualification process. And so we use their qualification process to make certain that our salespeople are utilizing their time wisely and not spending it on non-qualified opportunities.
Very good. Well, we made it 15 minutes without talking about AI, so I kind of feel we probably have to. So are you using AI in that sales process to maybe, one of the features we introduced recently was capturing the qualification methodology from the call recordings and putting it into Salesforce records for the customers. Are you finding other tools, or how are you finding the sales team starting to lean into AI at the moment?
Yeah, not only am I a believer in AI, but actually I'm not real. This is actually an AI automated image of me right now. And this isn't me talking. No, but of course, man, I use AI for everything. It's really interesting because we load the demographic into our messaging tools, right? Our demographic of our ICP. And then we create our messaging based upon what's the highest, most appealing to that demographic. So yeah, we use our AI for scoring. We use our AI for our intervals. We definitely use AI in our messaging, use AI within Gong. So yeah, it's a must play right now.
So, Brady, you were talking about Axiom sales kinetics. I'm keen to understand more because it's not something I'm particularly familiar with. I've done all the training on whether it's Medpic and Spice and so on. We've all been on the courses. Getting people to use them after the course is always the big challenge, or at least getting them to record it is a challenge. So, talk us through that 4-step process you were talking about earlier, and kind of how you go about actually going from theory to actually using it in practice.
Yeah, so it's been wonderful because first of all, I encountered it in the early 2000s, right? The type of sales training where you go to a weeks long sales training, you're bought in, you have every intention in the world of using it. They give you a 25-pound 3-ring binder. You go back, you put it on top of your cube, and it does nothing but collect dust, regardless of your intention of using it. So I've seen Axiom really go through from sticking with this incredible methodology that they have. There's not anything close to it, to evolving and focusing only on adult learning concepts. And so now their deployment method and how we deploy Axiom is much more applicable and meaningful to the people who are using it, because instead of deploying it all in one week, it's deployed via their SaaS platform in small bite-sized chunks, just 15 to 20 minutes each week. And so now the adoptability, right, the buy-in, their ability to execute it, the salespeople that is significantly higher than it ever was in the past. And then so going to their methodology, it really comes down to 4 items, right? So you have prospecting, qualifying, presenting, and then handling and overcoming objections. And so handling and overcoming objections is something I'm extremely passionate about. And within each one of those 4 models, everything is logical, repeatable, and scalable, right? So it's a cookie cutter. You keep applying it. That's how I grew Marketo from 1 to 53. That's how I grew the sales force within CBion to 2 different offices, on the East Coast and the West Coast. It's that logical, repeatable, scalable process. But going back to my favorite portion, the 4th step within their process, it's handling and overcoming objections. And this is what I'm very passionate about. So as sales professionals, we're guaranteed a couple things, right? We're guaranteed there's gravity. We're guaranteed that we're going to breathe oxygen. And man, we're guaranteed we're going to run against objections every day. And so if you surveyed 100 salespeople, only one salesperson out of 100 guy would tell you, hey, yeah, I have a logical, repeatable process that I use to handle and overcome objections, which is asinine, right? There's these stupid things like the Ben Franklin close, or the assumptive close, all these different things that nobody wants to be associated with. But Axiom has this 6-step process where it's very transparent and authentic, right? There's nothing manipulative. And it's basically just how to identify an objection, understand it, set it aside, quantify it. And on the quantification step, I usually find it's a 6-step process, right? But I usually find when you do the quantification step that you're past the objection. But I'm really passionate about this, about my salespeople having a logical and repeatable process to handle and overcome objections in a very transparent and authentic manner. So, but more so about Axiom, besides their 4-step logical, repeatable, and scalable process, it really helped me to come up with this formula of proficiency times productivity equals revenue. And if you would like this, or anyone who's watching this, I have it built out into an Excel spreadsheet. Please feel free to contact me through LinkedIn. I'd send it to you for free, of course, but it's very simple. Basically, it's us as sales leaders working the number backwards, right? And then showing if we can use either sales enablement technology, if we can help someone get more proficient, if we can increase productivity in these different stages within the sales process, how it drives revenue, right? And so if we can, like for instance, when I go and I lead a sales team and I take them through this tool, well, one gentleman who is closing at a rate of 25%, he needs to propose 10 deals a week, right? And then this lady who's closing at a 35% clip, well, she only needs to propose 6 deals a week, right? So it helps you, instead of painting with a broad brush where you don't get much buy-in, everybody make 100 calls, right? That's horse crap, right? It's, hey, what is your proficiency level within closing? What is your proficiency level in your conversion ratio from SQL to proposed, et cetera? What's your ACV? And based upon how you sell, then we can set activity levels, right? And so when you do that with each individual, then there's a significant amount of more buy-in, and people, are much more apt to follow those activity or those KPIs that we call them. But all that came from Axiom. Again, I don't find that there's anything a close second. And no, I don't own it. I don't get anything from people signing up. So, but it's incredible. I'm more than happy to make an introduction if you need it.
I love the enthusiasm. It's great to see, and we did a whole piece around objection handling in the analysis, and we saw. I'm keen to get your thoughts on this, but we saw that those that deal with objections much earlier in the sales process have much better conversion rates. Those that leave the objections until you're kind of presenting back the solution, and it's the decision's already been made in their heads. So dealing with those objections early, really trying to help the customer raise the objections in the first place, almost prompting them to kind of talk through the objections with you is such a powerful way of doing it. And we've seen the volume of objections being raised, in particular around ROI, has skyrocketed in this year in particular, especially because we're seeing the finance persona taking a much more active role in the sales process. And again, the earlier you can engage with them, the better the win rates are, from what we're seeing on the data. So I totally buy into that, and I'm certainly going to be taking that away. That I've written down that the Axiom model, as well as Sales 2.0, I think is something our audience should absolutely pick up a book on, and so definitely worth thinking about. I also love the idea around the shared revenue targets for sales and marketing. I think that's an absolute no-brainer, and I'll certainly be taking that away from here as well. Final questions from me, Brady. Tell us about your tech stack. What are what have you got? What do you lean into? What are the tools that kind of make your team operate?
You couldn't be more right in regards to discovering objections earlier in the process and asking those tough questions. So many salespeople are scared to ask that. They want to pretend that these objections aren't really there in hopes that they get the sale or for whatever reason. But actually there's data behind that, guy, what you were saying, because we do something called information objectives, right? And the more information that you uncover, whether it's positive or negative information, we can statistically prove that the more information that you uncover in the qualification stage, the higher probability you have of making that sale. So that goes right along the lines of exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, my first sales boss always said to me, "You've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that ratio," which I always took away. And asking the right questions and gathering the right information is always absolutely key. So, what else are you using in the business?
Yeah, so I advise a couple companies, and so it really depends on. I have a couple go-tos, of course, right? But it really depends on what stage the company's at. So if it's a more mature stage for marketing automation and email provider stage, then I'm looking at Marketo. If they are a big Salesforce fan and they're more mature, then of course we're going with the Salesforce, the old Pardot model, right? But if it's a startup phase, if a company's sort of more in that bootstrap, then I'm definitely pushing them towards HubSpot. And then from a sequencing perspective, I'm going with our darling Atlanta startup, from Kyle Porter, SalesLoft. So I'm a huge SalesLoft fan. And then, of course, we talked about it earlier, Gong.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. Okay, very good. And you've been using Gold for a while now. It sounds like it's a key component. And are you just using the core recording pieces, or are you taking some advantage of some of the other features within that stack?
We have some snap-ins within the Gong. So basically it's the call recording and then doing analysis within the call recording to find. So basically, as I mentioned before, there's that model, right, of proficiency times productivity equals revenue. So we're able to, when we go and we dissect and we analyze those calls, we're able to identify where people need to go to become more proficient within their sales. And then we can assign them different modules within the Axiom Salesforce, the Axiom Kinetics model. We can, through their SaaS platform, we can assign different modules to those salespeople so they can become more proficient and wherever they're showing an opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, I think we should probably talk at some point, get you excited about adding Ebsta into your stack, but we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. I really appreciate the visibility of everything that you're working on, and really fascinating. And Brady, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, you can reach me through LinkedIn. I love to help people. So you can contact me through LinkedIn. And if it's not, if it's during the business day, then I can't believe I'm doing this, but I love to help people. You can always call me. My number is 404-788-2628. That's 404-788-2628. But please know I'm East Coast time here in the US. And if you could keep that within business hours, I would appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Brady. Really lovely to spend some time with you. And as I say, we'll include a few of the links of the topics you discussed today in the podcast. And thank you for joining us and for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights. If you want to learn more, subscribe to our newsletter and we'll deliver every episode straight to your inbox. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Our links will be in the episode notes. See you next week.